In this video, I'm going to show you everything you need to know regarding the driving in the Flower Cup. This time around, I'm going to try something a little different. When I went over the Mushroom Cup, I showcased the full shroomless lines on its tracks for both Wiggler and Scooty before getting into the specifics on how to drive the track. I'm going to do the opposite today, but I'll still summarize the driving at the end rather than just let the gameplay speak for itself. And as always, I'll also be going over the shortcuts and the coin routes, and I'll be going over the strategies next week. So let's start giving her, bud. Mario's Circuit is definitely one of the more basic tracks in the game, driving wise, but there are still a few neat things you can do. Starting the race, you don't have too much to worry about. Just hold a left drift around the first big turn. Your stick should either be in neutral position or tight left for the most part, as this is the best way to charge up your Ultra Mini Turbo while simultaneously going through the turn as fast as possible. Once you release your Ultra Mini Turbo after the turn, you want to perform a right drift and soft drift as much as you can before having to hold wide. With a quick right soft drift as you approach the first coin with Scooty, or as you collect the first coin with Wiggler, you should be able to release the Super Mini Turbo. This can be a little risky, especially with Wiggler, and it can be pretty hard to collect all 4 coins if you desire them. Releasing your Ultra Mini Turbo early, then charging up a regular Mini Turbo isn't a bad alternative. It's not as fast, but it's a lot more reliable if you're using Wiggler. But anyway, coming up to the next turn, how you approach it is situational with Wiggler, but with Scooty, you can actually go tighter than the Piranha Plant's bite spots. Even when taking the same lines, trying this with Wiggler won't work because of the vehicle's vertical hitbox. So if there is a plant and you're on Wiggler, you just gotta drive around it. Anyway, you want to perform a left drift and charge an Ultra Mini Turbo around the turn. You can release it once you reach the straight. This part isn't too special, you just want to trick off the 2 ramps and you're giving her. Although if you trick in the very middle of the second ramp, you can collect both coins. It's pretty sick. This next turn is also pretty straightforward, just perform a right drift and charge up an Ultra Mini Turbo. As you finish the turn, you want to perform a left drift and hold a left soft drift as long as you can, as shown here. You then want to hold wide until you can release a Super Mini Turbo into either 2 or 3 right hops into a left drift. Whatever is necessary for you to get back on track. Because this is basically the same procedure as the second turn on this track, after your Ultra Mini Turbo, if you want to, you can also do 2 left hops into a left drift and execute a regular Mini Turbo before the final turn. Again, it's slower, but it's a lot more reliable on Wiggler. As you perform a right drift and charge an Ultra Mini Turbo on the final turn, just remember that Scooty can go tighter than the Piranha Plant's bite spots and Wiggler can't. All that's left for you to do is press R or ZR after going off the glider ramp to perform a low glider, and if you release an Ultra Mini Turbo, you're giving her full throttle. So in summary, hold a left drift around the first turn into a precise Super Mini Turbo as you get on the anti-gravity section. Perform a left drift on the next big turn and stay laser tight if you're on Scooty, and go around the plant if you're on Wiggler. Release your Ultra Mini Turbo on the next straight and do 2 tricks on the left ramp, then the middle ramp. Perform a right drift and charge up an Ultra Mini Turbo around the next turn into another precise Super Mini Turbo as you approach the final turn. Once again, remember that Scooty can go inside the plant's bite spots. Perform a low glider with an Ultra Mini Turbo, and just like that, it's another day in the office there, bud. There aren't any special shortcuts on this track, but there are 2 that stand out here for sure. On the 2 big off-road sections of the track, you can cut all of it off with 2 shrooms. On the first big turn though, you will skip an item box by doing this, so if you don't want to miss it, you can use 1 shroom and still cut off 2 pipes. And even though you won't miss an item set on the last big turn, if you just so happen to only have 1 shroom, you can still cut off 1 pipe and a wee bit of off-road if you'd like. You'll also be able to end the lap in the air, so this can be pretty solid in a lap through situation. But yeah, no flashy shortcuts here by any means. This track is pretty generous for coins. You can collect up to 9 coins while driving tight in 1 lap, 10 if you're able to pick up all 4 coins here. It is a bit tricky if you're doing the Super Mini Turbo method though, so just keep that in mind. If you need other options for coins though, you should be covered. You have the 3 wide coins at the beginning, the 2 sets of 2 coins, which you'll have to go quite out of your way for, and the very wide 3 coins on the final turn. So one way or another, you have a ton of options for coin collecting here. But that's all there is to talk about regarding the driving on Mario Circuit. So let's start ripping on Toad Harbor there, bud. Toad Harbor is a pretty cool track to drive overall. When you start the race, you want to immediately get ready to do the beginning shortcut. This isn't necessary if you're in the back, but if you want to keep first, you better be going for this. When doing the right drift, I like to start out a little wide just for more flexibility. I say only a little wide because if you try to make it too easy by positioning yourself even wider, you'll likely get bumped before you even get to the disc. Anyways, as I mentioned in another video, I like to aim for this weed, and just before hopping, I hold left. Then do a left hop, and you should get a ton of air. If If you do all of this correctly, you should be given our full throttle. Coming up to the boost ramp, you want to do a right slide into a right drift. You then want to perform a mini turbo trick off the second ramp. I didn't mention this strategy in my getting started video, but if you delay your trick until just after leaving the ramp and hold right as you trick off the ramp, you'll gain a lot more speed than mini turbo tricking on the middle of the ramp per se. Anyway, once you land on the track, you want to reposition yourself safely and give yourself enough time to charge up an ultra mini turbo. So when I land, I like to do a left hop into a right hop into a right drift. This kind of hop drift combination in general is really good for charging mini turbos quickly. So do some soft drifting where you can and charge up an ultra mini turbo this turn. When you approach the split path, you want to perform a left hop into a right slide into a left drift. Soft drift as much as you can and charge up an ultra mini turbo before doing a right hop into a right drift off the ramp. You want to soft drift in the air after you go off the ramp. You then want to release a super mini turbo into a right drift before going over the bump where the track becomes 1. Quickly charge up a regular mini turbo, release it, and do a right hop on the straight. You can do an additional mini turbo with Scooty if you'd like. Now onto the big turn. For the most part, you want to keep your stick in a neutral position while ever so slightly tilting it left and right in order to charge up an ultra mini turbo. Whatever suits you best while still maintaining as much speed as possible. Nearing the end of the turn, that's your cue to put more focus on edging out an ultra mini turbo. When you get it, release it and position yourself towards the right section of the downhill. You'll most likely get 2 or 3 tricks off the little bumps here, and while getting those tricks, you want to position yourself towards the boost ramp. I like to do a right hop or slide before going off the ramp, but I can't guarantee if that's faster or not. Either way, once you land, do a right hop into a right slide, into a left drift, release a normal mini turbo before getting around the turn, soft drift around the final turn to charge up a super mini turbo, and you should be given her. Putting it all together, you want to start a little wide before going into the beginning shortcut, hold wide before hopping, and hop left. Remember to release your mini turbo just before leaving the ramp and hold right upon tricking for maximum profit. Charge up an ultra mini turbo around this turn, release it before the split path, and then charge up an ultra mini turbo, which you'll release before drifting off the boost ramp. Perform a left drift just before going over the bump where the track becomes 1 and release it on the straight. You can do an additional mini turbo with Scooty if you'd like. Charge up an ultra mini turbo around the big turn and position yourself towards the right section of the downhill. Get 2 or 3 tricks from the bumps and trick off the boost ramp. And after getting the last mini turbo and super mini turbo, it's just another day in the office there, bud. Alright, there are quite a few things to talk about regarding the shortcuts and strats on this track. First off, there are multiple ways you can perform the beginning shortcut, but it's situational. I already talked about the main method, so let's go over the other methods. This method is much slower, but it is a lot safer, and it is faster than going around the disc to begin with. By hopping on the left side of the crate, there's next to no chance you'll get slowed down by the off-road. You also have the super mini turbo method, which is a lot easier and can even be faster on lap 2 and 3. I'd highly recommend using this one online. After the first split path, if you have a mushroom, a decent spot to use it is through the crates and barrels. Items tend to pop out here though, so it is a little risky, but it could help you out a wee bit if you do come out safely. You also have the tram bounce on the downhill. This one is super situational as it depends on your pacing, but if you can get a trick off the tram, you should definitely go for it. It saves a huge amount of time. Finally, there's the ending shortcut. By running into the wall and letting it push you wide, you'll have a much easier way of charging up a super mini turbo, so you should be yeehaw no matter what. You have quite a few options for coin collecting here. With the tight lines I showcased earlier, you can easily collect up to 8 coins. There are, of course, a ton of alternatives if you need coins, though. Unfortunately, most of them are in obscure places on the track, such as the top path after the first split path and the anti-gravity section, so I won't go over them. You have the 2 sets of coins on the bottom path, 2 or 3 coins trailed by the tram, and the 2 coins on the left side of the downhill. But regardless, the track has you covered for coin collecting, so you shouldn't have to worry too much. That's how the cookie crumbles on Toad Harbor. Now let's get her going on Twisted Mansion. In general, Twisted Mansion is a pretty cool track to drive, and it just feels nice, honestly. When the race starts, you want to do 2 hops as you go up the stairs. Now, obviously, these aren't going to make or break your race, but doing so will help you out a tiny bit. As for the first split path, it's situational from which path you take, given what's going on around you, but I took the right path here since you can get 2 tricks here on lap 1. And of course, you should do 2 hops when going up this set of stairs as well, because, you know, you're saving like 0.01. Bada boom, bada bing. Anyways, you want to do the 2 tricks on the right path, and just before the track becomes 1, begin a left drift. You want to soft drift around the first turn and release an ultra mini turbo on the straight. As you approach the next turn, begin a left drift. You're going to charge an ultra mini turbo around the first turn in the underwater section, so you want to release your mini turbo into a right drift as you enter the underwater section. Your cues to soft drift are shortly after beginning the right drift, just before hitting the first coin, and as you approach the second coin. This can sometimes be a little tricky on Wiggler, but you should be given her in most cases. You then want to begin a left drift, soft drift as much as you can around the next turn, and begin to hold right around when you find yourself in the middle of the track. Release your Super Mario Turbo into a right hop shortly after you get it, and position yourself toward the left path. About the middle of the start of the left path to the left path turn is when you want to do a neutral hop into a right slide into a left drift. You do this because you want to charge up an Ultra Mini Turbo, which you'll release in low glider fashion. I find easily executing the glider strat to be inconsistent when you constantly hug the wall. So when I make it to the straight before the glider, I like to hold wide until I hit the wall. And of course, release and immediately press R or ZR after going off the glider ramp to low glider, and you should be given her. The method I use here does wonders online, and it's probably the safest way to do the glider strat. Either way, position yourself toward the top path and begin a left drift as soon as you land. You want to soft drift as much as you can on this turn in order to release an Ultra Mini Turbo on the second last straight. Now, this last turn is a little different for Wiggler and Scooty. On Wiggler, you just want to release your Ultra Mini Turbo into a right hop and do an easy right drift in between the hammer and the knight, and release the Mini Turbo before the finish line. On Scooty, you want to release your Ultra Mini Turbo a little later and immediately begin a right drift. Soft drift as much as you can before the last turn and hold wide until you can release a Super Mini Turbo. This is already a pretty tight Super Mini Turbo on Scooty, so this is not worth trying on Wiggler. Altogether, remember to do 2 neutral hops when going up the stairs, and make sure you can easily get the 1 or 2 tricks on either side. Charge up an Ultra Mini Turbo around the first turn and release it on the next straight. Charge up a Mini Turbo and immediately release it into a right drift as you enter the underwater section, in which you'll charge up an Ultra Mini Turbo, release it after the turn, and charge up a Super Mini Turbo, which you'll release on the left path. Do a right slide before performing a left drift to charge an Ultra Mini Turbo to release off the glider. Remember to low glider and position yourself toward the top path. Charge up an Ultra Mini Turbo, and after the last turn, release a Mini Turbo on Wiggler or a Super Mini Turbo on Scooty, and you'll be given her full throttle. There isn't too much to talk about regarding the shortcuts on this track. At the very beginning, you have the library shortcut, which you can easily go through by using 1 shroom while charging up an Ultra Mini Turbo, which you want to release on the straight. You also have the ending shortcut, which by hopping just before hitting the off-road as shown here, can be done with only 1 mushroom needed. Just be aware that in a lap 3 situation, this shortcut is a hot spot, so it wouldn't be in your best interest to waste all your shrooms here just in case you get hit. This is probably one of the most generous tracks in the game for coin collecting. You can easily collect more than 10 coins by taking tight lines. And the best part is that if you're far behind, you have a ton of options for coin collecting. You have the 2 coins on the left path, the wide coins on the first turn, the right path coins, the left and right sets of coins on the glider section, the 3 coins if you have to take the bottom path, and the wide 3 coins at the very end. The point is, in most cases, you don't have to worry about coins here. And that's Twisted Mansion for you. Let's finish her off on Shy Guy Falls. In my eyes, Shy Guy Falls is one of the most fun tracks in the game to drive. The first 2 turns aren't anything too special, just an easy Super Mini Turbo while positioning yourself to collect the first wide and second tight coin. You want to charge up an Ultra Mini Turbo and release it into a left hop before going over the anti-gravity ramp. When coming up to the first boost ramp, I like to do a left hop before going over, just to ensure I don't get a crazy high trick. You want to begin a left drift as soon as you land, and once you're in the middle of the track on the waterfall straight, release your Mini Turbo and perform a right hop onto the ramp in which you'll trick. Now, the boost pedals that come towards you do have a pattern, at least for when you should go over them. I did a test run on all 3 laps here, and as you can see, the pattern is generally the same when you're front running. Center to right to center to left. Now, obviously, this exact pattern might not be in your best interest if you fell down in the pack, are moving around items, or trying to get a specific double box. In this case, it would be the right doubles. But when running, this is the pattern you should expect. This comes in handy when going over the last boost panel before tricking off the waterfall ramp, since you won't really see it before going over it. It's also faster to hop on this section. I'm not exactly sure why. I'm guessing it has to do with the fact that you're driving up a waterfall, but that's besides the point. Anyway, you want to begin a left drift as soon as you land from the waterfall. You want to charge an Ultra Mini Turbo, and just after passing this patch of grass, you want to perform 2 right hops into a left soft drift. You want to release your Mini Turbo as soon as you get it, immediately into a right drift. Now, there is a way you can get a lot more speed on the glider section. I'm not the best at doing this, but I think I've developed a consistent method. You want to be to the very left of the glider ramp before releasing your Mini Turbo. And right after you leave the waterfall, release your Mini Turbo, perform a left hop, and trick off the ramp. You should get a lot more speed than normal if you do it correctly. Now onto the track's meat and and potatoes. You want to take the top path and position yourself toward the right coin and trick off the ramp. You then want to immediately begin a right drift as you approach the shroomless shortcut. You want to position yourself just to the right of this weed, release your mini turbo just before hitting the grass, perform a left hop, and trick off the ramp. This is obviously very risky, so it's not a bad idea just going around the shortcut, but there is a much easier method for this, which I will get to shortly. Anyway, you want to perform a mini turbo trick off the ramp, and as you go around the final turn, you want to perform a right drift and soft drift as much as you can to charge a super mini turbo, which you'll release as soon as you get it. Putting it all together, easily make your way through the first 2 turns and release an ultra mini turbo as early as you can, ideally before the anti-gravity ramp. Remember to do a left hop just before going over the boost ramp and begin a left drift immediately. Make sure to hop on the first waterfall section and remember the center to right to center to left pattern when front running. Charge up an ultra mini turbo around the next turn and execute 2 mini turbos on the second waterfall section, with the second mini turbo being just after leaving the waterfall to get the fast glider. Take the top path and trick off the ramp, grabbing the far right coin, perform a left hop just before hitting the off-road. Trick off the ramp and begin a right drift, perform a mini turbo trick off the last ramp, charge up a super mini turbo around the last turn, and you're yeehaw until the cows come home. So obviously with the ending shortcut, you can easily shroom through it, and yeah, that was the intended way to do it. But there's a method for the shroomless shortcut that's way easier than the fast method, and even though it's slower, it's still faster than going around the shortcut. You want to take the bottom path for this method. I like to position myself toward the left coin and immediately begin a left drift. You want to charge up a mini turbo while holding wide to eventually give yourself as much room as possible to charge up a super mini turbo. Release your mini turbo as soon as you get it, immediately into a right drift. You want to soft drift until just before you leave the shadow of the top path, in which you'll hold left. You don't have to hit the wall here, but you'll have a lot more time to charge up a super mini turbo. In any case, release your super mini turbo as soon as you get it into a left hop. This may sound complicated at first, but trust me, it is way easier than the fast method and is worth doing online for sure. Just like the other tracks in the Flower Cup, this track is also very generous with coins. You can easily collect more than 10 coins if you use the shroomless lines I mentioned earlier. But as always, you do have some other options. You have either set of 2 or 3 coins at the start, the 4 wide coins after the boost ramp, any set of 2 coins after the first waterfall, the ring of coins on the glider section, and the coins around the ending shortcut. So yeah, if you're not loaded with coins, it shouldn't take you too long to gather them up. But that's all there is to Shy Guy Falls for driving. I hope you got something out of this video. If you liked what you saw, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And if I missed anything important, let me know in the comments. It's a great way to give a brief explanation of whatever, so people can learn even more about these tracks, including myself. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic day, and keep on giving her, bud.